Greetings and welcome back to Wolf Kage Los Angeles. Today we bring you a heavy story out of Southern California. In the skies over San Diego, tragedy has struck. A small plane went down, claiming the lives of at least 3 people. Think about that for a moment. A routine flight turned fatal in seconds. Witnesses described the sound as a thunderclap from nowhere, followed by flames and smoke that billowed into the sky. The crash site, a quiet neighborhood, suddenly transformed into chaos. According to the FAA, there are over 45,000 flights a day in the U.S. But when something goes wrong, it reminds us of how fragile life really is. Let's take a moment to look at this clip and reflect on what happened.
We do have to continue on with some of these updates that we're getting into our newsroom at this point. Just about 30 minutes ago, a short press conference from the NTSB wrapped up there in San Diego, California, after a small plane crashed into a neighborhood. Want to put up some video that we've seen there of the scene in the meantime, as well as we're giving you some of these updates that we've seen. So what we do know is that it's official. This is confirmed by the Associated Press. The music sound agency, Sound and Talent Group, said today that 3 of its employees, including its co-founder, Dave Shapiro, died on the private plane that crashed into a San Diego neighborhood. Shapiro is listed as the owner of the plane and does have a pilot's license as well. This is all according to the FAA. Shapiro also owned a flight school called Velocity Aviation and that record label Velocity Records, according to his LinkedIn page. The agency at this point has not shared the names of the other employees who have also died, but they did release this statement to the Associated Press saying, "We are devastated by the loss of our co-founder, colleagues, and friends. Our hearts go out to their families and everyone impacted by today's tragedy."
Wow. So the flight originated from an airport in New Jersey. It made a quick stop in Kansas to refuel and then continued on to its final destination, of course, which was San Diego, but it never made it. On descent, the plane clipped a home, slamming into the middle of a quiet residential street. The impact, as you can see, it was catastrophic. Jet fuel poured from the wreckage, ignited a firestorm that consumed every single car on both sides of the street. Picture that. An entire block that ended up like a war zone. Among the victims was Dave Shapiro, who was the co-founder of a music talent agency called Sound Talent Group. A key player in the music industry. He was a licensed pilot. He was a flight instructor and a ground instructor. Yet, it's still unclear if he was the one that actually was piloting the plane when it went down. Also lost in the crash was Daniel Williams, Shapiro's friend and former drummer of the metalcore band, The Devil Wears Prada. Okay, so yes, accidents happen. But when people with influence, people from powerful corners of entertainment suddenly vanish in fiery crashes, you kind of have to pause a little bit, or at least I do. Is it purely tragic coincidence? Or could there be more beneath the surface? I'm not saying foul play is involved, but you have to admit this isn't your everyday aviation mishap. Let's take a look at the aftermath. Here's what the scene looked like just moments after the crash.
Scramble to douse cars. Families rush to safety. This is what Ruth Lutz saw when she went outside.
I felt like I was in a movie, but in live, and I was just like, wow, this is real life.
You ran out with your pajamas on your back. That's it.
That's it.
Just before 4 a.m, a Cessna 550 jet crashed into the neighborhood during foggy weather. NTSB investigators say it first clipped a power line, then crashed into a home and multiple vehicles.
Here you can see that its trajectory came through this direction, took out the front of that house, and it ended up here to the right behind me.
At least 3 people were killed, all of them believed to be on the plane. Among those feared dead, Daniel Williams, the former drummer for a popular hardcore Christian metal band, The Devil Wears Prada. He filmed himself boarding the aircraft and shared a photo of himself at the controls. His father confirmed to CBS News he was on the plane. Minutes before the crash, the pilot expressed concerns about the weather to air traffic controllers.
So, right now, officials are pointing to heavy fog as the likely cause of the crash. And sure, that's plausible. San Diego's coastal climate can produce thick marine layers that blind pilots in an instant. Visibility can drop from miles to mere feet in seconds. But, I have to be honest with you. Something about this just doesn't sit right. I'm not trying to wear a tinfoil hat here, but again, when high profile figures go down like this, and when the story gets wrapped up with a neat little weather explanation so quickly, it makes me wonder, could it really just be fog, or is that the easiest answer to give the public? I'm not jumping to conclusions. But like I always say, when something smells off, it usually is. Let's take a closer look at the plane's trajectory. I'm going to speed up the footage so that we can analyze what happened in the moments before the impact. Let's check this out.
Heading through 17000 or 12000.
This is 6 Hotel approach. The Montgomery Bay Talk is out of service. What approach would you like?
Yeah, 6 here. Yeah, we noticed that. Yeah, RNAV 28, please.
6 here, clear direct net speed, descend proper Christian, maintain 900,000.
Okay, 6 here, direct net speed, descending for 900,000.
So far, so good.
Here, I didn't know if you really had any idea on the weather. I got the Gillespie weather, but as I'm sure you know, it's systematically different between Gillespie and Montgomery.
So, let me see what I can find out for you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, according to Gillespie, it's pretty much down to minimum, so I just want to see what I'm in for here.
No problem. Okay. Number 6 here, I've got the Miramar automated weather. 0955 Zulu with wind calm, visibility 1/2, and indefinite ceiling 200.
Okay, all right. That doesn't sound great, but we'll give it a go.
6 here, Roger, defend and maintain 5,500.
I think we're 5,500, 6 here. Yeah, just in case we have to go on that. How's the ground looking? Is that pretty similar?
Up here, affirmative, a little bit better, but not much. It's showing December. Okay, they're showing 1031 Zulu weather with calm. They're really 2.5 mid, ceiling 300, broken structure, 300 volts.
Okay, picked up there a little better, but higher minimum, so probably not a great option either. So I'll come back to you with an alternative.
Up here, right? Picked up here, so you can make sense okay from there. You want to turn you out to the south.
I think up there. No, I think we'll be all right.
Up here, Roger, 5 miles from Nessie, cross matter above 3,800, clear on Amber, 22, right?
At about 3,800 for clear on F28 right approach.
Number 6 up here, I reported for cancellation after landing. You have a phone. Do you have a number?
6 up here, yeah, I've got a number.
Up here, Roger,
6 up there, thanks. Well, hopefully not see you, but might happen. We're trying to play data from 6 up in Sierra, 3 miles final 2 days.
Wow. Wow.
Unfortunately, this aircraft did not make it to the airport, and based on media reports on the ground, the aircraft hit power lines on the final approach. We have NOTAMs at the airport that indicate the PAPI and approach lighting system is out of service for runway 28. Now, I've personally gone into runway 28 before, and I want to tell you something about runway 28. It is a shortened runway, and you do not want to go into this when you don't have the most ideal scenario for this size of jet. I personally have diverted away from the shortened 4,600-foot runway and diverted over to the San Diego International Airport, which is about a 20-minute drive away, because I wanted a longer runway, especially in either wet or low IFR conditions. So I've personally been... Now, what we know about the Montgomery Gibbs Airport is, again, the PAPI and the approach lighting system was out of service. We know that the pilot was setting up for runway 28 right. It's worth noting there are two runways, 28 right and 28 left. In his CTAF transmission, which we'll hear in just a moment, he actually cuts off which runway he's going to land on, and he only says that he's inbound on runway 28, which in my opinion also suggests that he might not be as familiar with the airport as, well, a pilot hopefully would be going into this, low IFR, and at night. On top of that, we see that there are only approaches for runway 28, and in this case, the pilot chose the runway 28 RNAV. A very critical marker on this runway 28 approach right here is watching here, Penny, the final approach fix, which is a 2,500 at or above altitude restriction, and then Palos, which actually occurs just before these obstacles at 554 feet. Now, Palos, we don't actually have a minimum altitude for Palos unless you are using the localizer approach, and the minimum altitude at Palos is 1,380 feet. Now, why is Palos so important in this example? Well, Palos is really important because when we look at Palos on the map and we throw where Palos is onto a visual overlay of the space right here, we can see that Palos is right here, right before these obstacles. We could see on the VFR sort of aerial satellite imagery here that there are these three white triangles indicating obstacles at that 554 level. Now, what are those obstacles? Well, if we remove the plate and we jump back in to see what these obstacles are, what we could find are the following. We could find lighting unknown, tower at 549. Okay, that's not great. What do we have here? Lighting unknown, obstacle at 540, and lighting unknown, obstacle at 540. And then right here, we find, dangling power lines at 422 feet.
So, whether or not foul play was the situation or not, we'll never know. Perhaps it's the power lines. Hard to tell. I do know, leading up to the crash, the pilot sounded pleasant. He didn't sound frazzled. He didn't sound nervous. He seemed very confident. But at the end of the day, we have to focus on the fact that lives were lost, families shattered, and a quiet San Diego neighborhood was turned into a disaster zone in a matter of seconds. So all we can do now is keep the victims, the families, and everyone affected in our thoughts and prayers. But still, I'll be real with you. What bothers me most is how often we see tragedies like this explained away only to find out years later, even decades later, that something darker was at play. From JFK to Aaliyah, from plane crashes to sudden disappearances, the pattern seems to always be similar or the same. Public grief first, then silence, and eventually a whisper of truth. I'm not saying that's what happened here, but when that spidey sense kicks in, I listen. That's all I have for now. I am Wolf Kage, and this is Wolf Kage Los Angeles. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who thinks deeper than the headlines. Until the next time, peace.
Mm-hmm.